I had several questions on the numbers I brought up, and I want to emphasize that they're relative sense numbers, not direct quote numbers. And by relative sense, I mean they give you a feel of the infection risk of airborne versus the feel of an infection risk of fomite. This commenter made a false equivalency to influenza, but to very quickly dispel that, for instance, on human skin, influenza can only last an hour on human skin, usually less than an hour, while COVID can last for up to 8 hours or longer on human skin. COVID is significantly more stable than influenza, so there really is no comparison there. So, first, why is it relative sense? Well, it's because it's incredibly unethical to experiment on humans by giving people a disease and just seeing what happens to them. That's unethical. So, to get a sense of that, we have to look to animal models. And I've covered these papers that I'm going to show you before. You can go to my YouTube channel for my COVID transmission playlists, specifically the COVID infection pathways and the COVID fomite transmission risk. I go in far more detail than I'm about to show you. But for this paper right here on Syrian hamsters, they looked at fomite transmission risk by taking sick hamsters out of their cages, letting the cage settle, and then introducing new healthy hamsters into those cages. And they found that 4 out of 8 of the animals, or 50%, got infected with COVID. And they also did an airborne infection model as well, where 100% of the animals got infected. But again, this is an extreme scenario because they're in a closed wall place where they are directly sharing air, so it's extreme conditions. But they also looked at against airflow. So the first example that I gave you where 100% got infected, that was with airflow when they did 4 Syrian hamsters against airflow. Only 1 out of the 4 animals got infected, showing that it's highly dependent on the airflow itself. And as we know, other factors like dose exposure, how much COVID you were exposed to and how long you were exposed to it. Then we have this paper on ocular infection of ferrets, so infection through the eyes doing a fomite exposure, where they showed both by doing an aerosolized exposure of the eyes only or by directly eye dropping COVID into the eyes, you could get infected with COVID, again in ferrets. Where through ocular inoculation, which would be a fomite contact, 66% got infected, and for the aerosol exposure, 100% got infected, 3 out of 3. And then we have this paper on ocular exposure to COVID in rhesus macaques, where here they infected 2 macaques with COVID through the eyes, 1 via the trachea and 2 straight into the stomach, where COVID infection was generated in both the eye infected samples and the intratracheal infected samples.